This story begins with a man asleep in his bed. Not a prophet on a mountain, not a priest in a temple. A man, 365 years old by the book's own counting, lying on his couch at night, resting, the way you are resting now. His name is Enoch, and the text that carries his story says that while he slept, something changed in the room. Two figures appeared beside the bed. The book describes them with the kind of detail you only get from someone who cannot stop seeing it. They were enormous, larger than any men he had ever seen. Their faces shone like the sun. Their eyes were like burning lamps. Fire came out of their mouths when they spoke. Their wings were brighter than gold, and their hands whiter than snow. They stood at the head of his bed, and they called him by name. And Enoch, the text is very honest about this, woke and bowed and was terrified. The sleep, it says, fled from him. You are lying in the dark right now. The description of those faces, the gold wings, the snow-white hands, the fire from the mouths, appeared at another person's bedside, in a much older dark room, a very long time ago. The person woke and bowed and was afraid. You are not afraid, but you are in the same condition, lying down, in the dark, at the edge of the hour when these things happen. Remember the two faces at the foot of the bed. We will come back to them at the very end of the night. What the two visitors said next is the reason this book exists. They told him not to be afraid. They told him he had been chosen, and they told him that he was about to be taken up, not in spirit, not in a dream. The text insists on this, taken bodily, on their wings, through the layers of the sky, through one heaven after another, each with its own inhabitants, its own storehouses, its own prisoners, its own light, all the way to the top. And unlike every other mortal in every other story, he would be allowed to come back for 30 days, to write down what he saw and leave the books with his children. The book that claims to preserve those writings still exists. It survives in a single ancient language, not Hebrew, not Greek, not Latin, and for most of history, almost nobody in the West knew it existed at all. What makes this particular story different from every other ancient ascent story, and there are many of them? The ancient world was fascinated by the question of what was above the clouds. Is the level of detail? Most ascent traditions give you impressions, flashes, the overwhelming brightness, the sound too large to process, the sense of scale that abolishes the human frame of reference. 2. Enoch gives you something else entirely. It gives you the inventory. Each heaven in this book has specific contents, specific populations, specific functions. The first heaven has storehouses, actual rooms where weather is kept. The second heaven has prisoners, specific beings, in specific conditions, with a specific request they want delivered. The third heaven has a geography with cardinal directions. Paradise is here, and the other place is north of it. The fourth heaven has timetables. The fifth has soldiers who are grieving something specific. The sixth has administrators keeping specific records. The seventh has an archangel with a specific name, an oil with a specific fragrance, and a result that is described in one of the most precise sentences in the ancient world: no observable difference. Whatever is outside your window tonight, the sounds of the city or the silence of the country, or the particular acoustic texture of wherever you are, this is where the story starts. Not in a temple, not on a summit, in a room, in the dark, in the posture you are in right now. A book about the sky that treats the sky the way an inspector treats a building, level by level, room by room, staff by staff, function by function. That precision is unusual enough to be worth sitting with before we begin. The ordinary ancient assumption was that what was above was too vast, too bright, too beyond to be itemized. 2. Enoch insists that it can be itemized, that the sky above the sky has a filing system and a staff roster and architectural features and a climate. that someone who went up there with the right kind of attention could come back with a complete account. Enoch came back with a complete account. Tonight we follow it. It is a travel diary of the sky, written level by a man who says he made the climb. Hold that phrase for tonight, a travel diary of the sky. Every level will have an entry. Every entry will have specific contents. By the time we reach the top, you will have the complete map. So tonight, we make the ascent with him, slowly, one heaven at a time. The 7 heavens, what did Enoch actually say he saw on the way up? What is stored in the lower skies? Who is imprisoned in the 2nd heaven? Why did paradise and the place of punishment share the same level? And what happened to him in the 7th, at the top? That meant he could never really come home again. Before we go up, let me say something. You don't need to follow every word tonight. This is a climb measured in hours, and you're allowed to drift on any level. If you fall asleep somewhere in the middle heavens, that's exactly right. The book will be there if you want to come back to it. Sleep is not a failure at this altitude, it's the whole point. This is for a particular kind of person, for the ones who look up at night and feel the layers, the ones who have always half believed there is more than one sky above the one they can see. For anyone who has ever wondered what's on the other side of the ceiling of the world. If that sounds like you, you're in exactly the right place. So settle in. Close your eyes if they aren't already closed. Let your body take up more of the space it's resting in. One question before we begin our climb. Where in the world are you tonight? And what hour is it where you are? Someone is in Johannesburg just past midnight. Someone in Vancouver watching the rain. Someone in Istanbul at 3 a.m. with the city going quiet. Leave it in the comments. I read them in the mornings and it matters to me where this reaches. And if this is the kind of night you come here for, a quiet tap on like or a subscribe if you haven't already, that's all I need. Everything else tonight is yours. Let me tell you what this book is and how it got here. Not what it claims, what it is, as a document, as a physical object that exists in the world, with a history that is in some ways stranger than anything in its pages. The text we are going to follow tonight is called 2 Enoch. Scholars also call it the Slavonic Apocalypse of Enoch, or the Book of the Secrets of Enoch. Those titles are not interchangeable. They emphasize different things, but they point at the same document, an ancient Jewish text, probably composed around the turn of the Common Era, telling the story of the patriarch Enoch's journey through the 7 heavens. You may have encountered 1 Enoch, the older tradition, the Book of the Watchers, the fallen angels, the petition scene, the journey to the cosmic abyss. We followed that tradition in a previous night. 2 Enoch is the same hero, a different book, a different journey, a different map. They share a name, a protagonist, and a fascination with the structure of the sky. Almost everything else about them is distinct. Do not blend them. The distinction matters, and we will honor it tonight. Here is what 2 Enoch is, academically and physically. It is a Jewish ascent text, almost certainly composed in Greek. The scholarly consensus locates its origin somewhere between Alexandria and the Levant, sometime around the 1st century of the Common Era, give or take a century on either side. Like much of the literature of that period, it belongs to the tradition sometimes called the pseudepigrapha, ancient texts attributed to biblical figures who did not write them, a convention well understood by the communities that produced them and not considered deceptive in the way that term might imply now. What makes 2 Enoch unusual, in a category of literature already full of unusual texts, is where it went after it was composed and how it survived. Whatever you are reading tonight, whatever translation or summary of 2 Enoch you have ever encountered, in whatever language, you are already once removed from something that was itself already a translation. The chain between you and the original is longer than it looks, and the original is gone. The Greek original is gone. Not damaged, not partially surviving in fragments at Qumran, or in footnotes in other writers. Gone. No Greek copy of 2 Enoch has ever been found. No Latin copy. No Hebrew copy. No Aramaic copy. The original language of composition, the language in which this book was thought and written and first read, has left no physical trace. What survived is a translation, specifically a translation into Old Church Slavonic, made sometime in the 10th or 11th century, probably in Bulgaria or another part of the South Slavic literary world, where the translation of Greek religious texts was a major cultural project. And this Slavonic version, already a translation, already one step removed from the original, is the only version of 2 Enoch that exists in the world. Everything we know about what the book says, we know through the Slavonic. Your body knows about hidden things. Things that survived not by being protected, but by being passed along quietly. A piece of knowledge in a family, a story in a tradition, a way of doing something that moved from hand to hand without ceremony. The Book of the Secrets of Enoch survived the same way. That is the first thing almost no popular retelling of this text mentions. When you read 2 Enoch, in any language, in any edition, in any summary, you are reading a translation of a translation whose original is lost. That is not a reason to dismiss it. Many ancient texts survive in exactly this condition. It is a reason to hold what you know of it carefully, and to remember that the chain of transmission is part of the text's story. The second thing most retellings don't mention is how 2 Enoch survived even in Slavonic. Think about what that means for the text you're following tonight. It survived by making itself unremarkable, by burying itself in the ordinary, by becoming one more thing in a larger collection, patient, anonymous, waiting in the margin of a chronicle until someone with the right kind of attention came along and noticed it. It did not survive as its own book. Nobody bound it in its own covers and shelved it in a library under its own title. What happened to 2 Enoch across the manuscripts we can trace, dating from the 14th to the 18th centuries, is that it was copied into larger miscellanies, collections, compilations of sermons, chronicles, calendar texts, liturgical readings, and spiritual material of various kinds, assembled over centuries in monasteries and scriptoria across the Slavic world. 2. Enoch arrived in the middle of these compilations, often without a title, often without a clear indication that it was a separate text at all, just a sequence of chapters about a man named Enoch being taken upward, nestled between a sermon and a saint's life, as if it had always belonged there. A book about climbing through the heavens survived by hiding in the margins of other books. There is something in that particular fact, a text about ascent preserved by burying itself in the ordinary, that feels like it belongs in the book itself. The Western world did not know 2 Enoch existed until 1880. That was the year a Russian scholar named Andrei Nikolaevich Popov produced the first complete scholarly edition, in Slavonic, for Slavonic readers, largely unknown outside that world. 20 years later, in 1896, the Oxford scholars R.H. Morfill and Robert Henry Charles published the first English translation, under the title they gave it, The Book of the Secrets of Enoch. That was the moment the English-speaking world learned there was a second Book of Enoch. That was 130 years ago. Charles went on to produce the standard academic apparatus around it, notes, comparisons, source analysis, and his work shaped how 20th century scholarship read the text. But Charles was not the last word, far from it. A French scholar named Vaillant published a competing edition in 1952, arguing for a different recension as primary. A. Anderson produced the critical English edition that most scholars currently use, in the Charlesworth volumes on the Old Testament pseudepigrapha, published in 1983. And the field has been quietly arguing ever since about which of the text's 2 major versions is closer to the original. I said 2 versions. This is important. 2 Enoch exists in 2 recensions, a longer and a shorter version. They agree on the broad shape of the story: Enoch, the two visitors, the seven heavens, the transformation at the top. But they differ in ways that matter. Some passages appear only in the longer version. Some details are more elaborate in one than the other. And the longer version, as we will discover, does not stop at seven heavens. Settle into wherever you're resting. The credibility is now laid. We have the book. We have its history. We have its geography and the tradition. The gates of the first heaven are already open. The scholarly debate about which version came first, whether the longer is an expansion of a simpler original or the shorter is an abridgment of a more elaborate one, has now been running for over a century without resolution. Charles thought one thing, Schmidt thought another, Vaillant thought another. Anderson's edition hedges carefully. We are in territory where the specialists genuinely do not agree. This matters for tonight, because every scene we visit is a scene from a text with this kind of history behind it. Not because the uncertainty makes the scenes less interesting, it makes them more so. What we are following is not a stable, agreed-upon document with a definitive text. We are following a tradition, a set of images, a journey, a map of the sky that survived a translation and a hiding and a rediscovery and a century of scholarly argument and arrived here, at this hour, still recognizable as itself. Now hold a number for me. Hold it the way you'd hold a coin in a closed fist. 366. We will need it much later, nearly an hour and a half from now. It will not make sense yet. Just hold it. And one more thing, before we begin the climb. Somewhere in the letters of the New Testament, a collection you have almost certainly encountered, whatever your relationship to it, there is a passage where a man describes something that sounds, in outline, like the journey we are about to take. He says he was caught up to the third heaven. He says he heard things that cannot be told, that no person is permitted to repeat. He does not give his name in the passage, though the scholars are confident who he was. You are now the recipient of a transmission that started in the 3rd or 4th decade of the 1st century, passed through Greek to Slavonic, hid in miscellanies for 800 years, was found by a Russian scholar in 1880, and arrived at whatever device is playing this into your ears. Whatever that chain is, accidental, intentional, or something in between, it held. Let me say something about what the Seven Heavens tradition is, and where it comes from, because 2 Enoch did not invent it. No single text invented it. What 2 Enoch did was inherit it, absorb it, and push it to an extreme of specificity that no previous text had achieved. Your body is already slower than it was at the beginning of tonight. The scholarship is behind us. The wings of the 2 visitors are spread. What happens next is the reason this book survived. The idea of a layered sky, of heavens above heavens, each one more elevated and more rarefied than the one below it, runs through the intellectual and religious world of late antiquity with the insistence of a very old memory. The Mesopotamian world had a layered sky. The Babylonian astronomical tradition organized the sky in levels, associated with different divine powers, with different celestial functions. The 7 classical planets, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, each occupied a sphere, and those spheres were stacked in order of their speed and distance, from the fastest, the Moon, closest, to the slowest, Saturn, furthest. The 7 heavens correspond to the 7 planets. This is not speculation. The scholars who work on this material are confident of the connection. The ziggurat is part of this too. The great stepped towers of Mesopotamia, Babylon's included, were built as mountains, as physical models of the heavenly hierarchy, as structures through which the priest could ascend toward the divine by ascending physically through the levels. The ziggurat was a 7 heavens map made of mud brick. The cosmic map and the physical architecture corresponded. The idea that there were 7 levels to the sky was not invented by mystics or visionaries. It was built into the landscape of the ancient Near East, in the most literal sense. In stone, in brick, in the profile of towers you could see from a long distance. By the time 2 Enoch was written, by the turn of the Common Era, in the world of Second Temple Judaism, where Greek thought and Near Eastern tradition and the Hebrew biblical imagination had been in productive contact for centuries, the 7 heavens were a widely shared assumption. Not everyone agreed on exactly what was in each level, or what the levels were called, or whether the journey through them was available to living human beings, or only to the souls of the righteous after death. But the basic architecture was familiar. When 2 Enoch describes 7 heavens, its readers would have known the genre. They would have brought their own expectations to the text, and been surprised in some cases by where the text met those expectations and where it diverged. What is specific to 2 Enoch? What distinguishes it from the other ascent texts of its period is the comprehensiveness. It does not choose 2 or 3 heavens and describe them in detail while gesturing at the others. It describes all 7. It gives each of them a specific character and specific contents. It treats the ascent as a complete survey, a top-to-bottom account of the structure of the sky, rather than a vision of 1 or 2 privileged levels. That ambition is itself a theological statement. The writer of 2 Enoch believed that the sky was knowable, that it had a structure that could be described, that a human being, given access, could come back with a complete and accurate account. Whether any such access was possible is a question the text does not engage. It simply asserts that in Enoch's case, it happened, and proceeds from there. The assertion is the premise. The premise produces the inventory. Your body is already slower than it was at the beginning of tonight. The credibility is now laid. We have the book, we have its history, we have its map. It is time to do what the book was written for. The 2 visitors spread their wings beneath Enoch, and the first heaven opens like a door in the floor of the sky. We will meet him near the end of tonight. Right now, let's go up. The 2 visitors have spread their wings beneath Enoch. The first heaven opens like a door in the floor of the sky. The wings are enormous. That is the first physical detail the text gives you. Not what the sky looks like from above, how large the wings are that are carrying you. Larger than anything that should be able to lift a man. And beneath them, the ground is receding, the familiar world tilting away, the dark earth going small and dark as the 2 visitors rise with Enoch between them. And then the first heaven opens. The book has a specific architectural vocabulary for what it shows him at each level. Not vague impressions, specific inventories. What is here, who keeps it, what it does. The first heaven reads like the opening of a very old catalogue, a thorough one. What Enoch sees first in the first heaven is a sea, a great and dark sea, larger than the Mediterranean, larger than any water he had ever known, spread above the clouds, above the world, the way the world's oceans spread below. The ancient cosmological imagination placed water above the firmament as well as below, the deep above and the deep below, the sky as a membrane between 2 oceans. The first heaven is where the upper sea lives, and the upper sea is not empty. Around it and above it, the book describes a group of beings called the Star Elders, the great angels who govern the movements of the heavenly bodies. They are stationed here, at this lowest level, like a kind of celestial civil service, the administrators of the visible sky, the ones responsible for making the stars rise and set at the right times. They move among the stars the way a keeper moves among animals, the way a clockmaker tends the gears, with the intimate knowledge of long habit and total responsibility. Enoch watches them and says nothing. He is not yet asked to speak. In the first heaven, he is still a visitor, still adjusting to the fact of where he is. But it is what comes next that the first heaven is really known for in the text, and it is one of the most unexpectedly domestic images in any ancient ascent tradition. The treasuries. Wherever you are tonight, whatever is falling or not falling outside your window, the first heaven has the inventory for it. Your specific weather, in your specific place, on this specific night, is in the record. The angel assigned to your region's due has a number for the morning you're going to wake to. The book describes storehouses, enormous rooms, vaults, repositories, where the raw material of weather is kept. Not metaphorical weather, actual weather in actual storage. Snow in one place, ice in another, dew in a third, clouds waiting in a fourth, and in each storehouse, a guardian, an angel whose specific job is to keep the inventory, to measure it out, to release it at the right time in the right quantity, to the right part of the world. The snow angel knows how much snow the world needs. The cloud angel knows when to open the vault. The dew angel measures the morning moisture over a particular valley with the care of someone who has been doing this for a very long time. Stop here for a moment and let that image settle into the room. Weather, in this cosmology, is not random. It is not chaotic. It is not the accidental consequence of pressure systems and temperature differentials that nothing controls and nothing intended. Weather is a managed resource. Someone decided how much rain would fall on the hills of Judea in this season. Someone counted the flakes. Someone, enormous, attentive, immeasurably old, has a warehouse key. This is the first heaven's gift to you at bedtime. The world above the world is orderly. The storehouses are tended. Whatever is happening outside your window tonight, rain or cold, or the dry stillness before a storm, it was measured out. It was accounted for. The sky above you is full of vaults and guardians, and the careful work of distribution. And at the bottom of all of it, the very floor of the sky, is where the inventory is kept. You are right at the ceiling of that inventory. The storehouses are very close. The text does not linger here. Enoch does not ask questions in the first heaven. He looks, he registers, he is carried upward. The first heaven is not the destination, it is the adjustment. It is the place where the ascent teaches the traveler what kind of book this is going to be. A book of specifics, a book of administration, a book where heaven is not a vague radiant elsewhere, but a place with rooms and functions and staff. And then the escorts carry him up again, and the light changes. The second heaven is dark. Not the comfortable dark of a room at night, not the soft dark of clouds at evening. The second heaven, the text says, is a place of darkness, and in the darkness, hanging in chains, are the prisoners. Rest here for a moment. The first heaven is passing. Its domestic quality is exactly right for the beginning of a long climb. Nothing overwhelming, nothing incomprehensible, just the evidence that what is above the ordinary is organized and staffed and managing the world you're sleeping in. Enoch sees them, and the book does not flinch from what they are. They are angels, once members of the heavenly order, now fallen, now held in suspension in this second level while their fate is decided. They are not being punished yet, in the full sense. They are awaiting judgment. The sentence has been passed, but the execution of it is still pending. They hang in the dark, and the text describes their condition with one of the most affecting words in the whole account. They are weeping. Weeping. Not raging, not howling, not threatening. Weeping. The apostate angels in the second heaven are sad. Stay with that tone for a moment. The second heaven in Tut Enoch is not a horror, it is a tragedy. These are beings who had something, who lost it, who are now in the dark place between sentencing and consequence, and who have nothing to do but wait and weep. The text's handling of the second heaven is one of the things that marks it as a document of unusual emotional intelligence. It does not exploit the situation for drama. It registers the sadness and moves on. But before it moves on, something happens that plants one of tonight's longest-running threads. The prisoners see Enoch, and they ask him something. The text is careful here. It does not record their exact words, only that they appealed to him, that they made a request, that there was something they wanted from this human being who was passing through their level of the sky. We will learn exactly what they asked for a little further up the climb. For now, hold the image, an ascending human being passing through a second heaven full of weeping angels in chains, and the angels looking at him with something that looks, from this distance, like hope. Your body is already slower than it was. The second heaven is dark, and the dark of it is the kind that presses gently. There is grief here, but it is old grief, settled grief, the grief of beings who have been here long enough that they no longer expect anything else. The chains are not new, the weeping is not urgent. It is simply the condition of the second heaven, dark, still, sad, and waiting. Let me stay in the first heaven a little longer, because its domestic quality deserves more attention than ascent literature usually gives it. You know what it is to wait for something that cannot be undone, to be in the interval between the moment when something is decided and the moment when you have to live with the decision. The second heaven is the cosmic address of exactly that experience. Its grief is old grief, settled, ambient, the kind that has stopped being urgent and become simply the condition of the place. The first heaven is the least dramatic level in the journey, and it is almost certainly designed that way. The text that follows it, the weeping prisoners in the second, the paradise and its shadow in the third, the sun chariot and its crocodile escorts in the fourth, all of that requires a kind of emotional and imaginative preparation, and the first heaven provides it. You cannot walk from the ordinary world directly into the seventh heaven's fire and throne without some intermediate adjustment. The storehouses of snow are the adjustment. Think about what it means to make a warehouse the first thing Enoch sees when he arrives above the clouds. A warehouse is the most unglamorous of spaces. It is functional. It has no ambiance to speak of. Its virtue is entirely in its utility. It stores things safely. It allows them to be retrieved when needed. It maintains the inventory between the time of deposit and the time of withdrawal. Nothing about a warehouse is designed to impress a visitor. And yet the first heaven is a warehouse, and the text presents this without apology. The sky above the sky is, at its lowest level, a place where supplies are kept. The atmosphere above the atmosphere is, when you first arrive in it, organized around a problem of resource management. How do you store snow without using it? How do you hold the dew in reserve for the morning that needs it? Who keeps track of how much ice the world has used and how much remains? Someone keeps track. That is the first heaven's answer to the question. The sky has a logistics system, and the logistics system is staffed by beings who are very good at what they do, and who have been doing it for an unimaginably long time. The star elders who govern the movements of the heavenly bodies, also present in the first heaven, are, in their own way, another kind of logistics. They manage the inventory of light, the schedule of celestial appearances, the timetable of the sky. What the first heaven gives you, at the beginning of a very long climb, is this: order. Evidence that what lies above is not chaos, that the sky above the sky is organized, that the organization is careful, that the care extends all the way down to the question of how much dew is appropriate for a particular field on a particular morning. If you find that comforting, you are reading the first heaven correctly. Let your breathing slow. The first heaven is passing behind you. The cold of the snow treasuries is real. Not the cold of winter, the cold of a storehouse. The specific cool of a room where something is being preserved. It is, in a way, the most calming cold there is. Now the escorts carry you upward into the second heaven, and the first thing you notice is that the cold of the storehouses is gone. What replaces it is not warmth, it is dark. The dark of the second heaven is the dark of a place that was once full of light and is no longer. Not the natural dark of night, which is simply the absence of day. The second heaven's dark has the specific quality of aftermath, the dark that follows something, rather than the dark that precedes it. It is the dark of a room where the lamp has been taken out, not the dark of a room where the lamp has never been brought in. Your breath is enough. The second heaven is dark, but the dark presses gently. Whatever is being held in suspension here has been here for long enough that the waiting has become its own kind of stillness. The prisoners in the second heaven were not always prisoners. They were once angels, members of the divine court, inhabitants of the heavenly levels, beings of the kind of dignity and radiance that the text associates with the higher heavens. Something changed. The text is not explicit about the nature of their transgression. It refers to their apostasy, their falling away, without the narrative detail that 1 Enoch provides for its 200 watchers. In 2 Enoch's second heaven, the prisoners are a fact, not a story. What matters is not how they got here, but what it is like to be here. What it is like to be here is dark and cold and waiting. The waiting is the part that the text emphasizes most. These are not beings in active torment. The text is careful about this. They are beings in suspension, between sentencing and consequence, between the decision that was made about them and the execution of that decision. They hang in chains in the dark, and the chains are not theatrical. They are simply the physical sign of the suspension, the marker of the in-between state. They are kept here the way a matter is kept under advisement. Judgment has been passed. Implementation is pending, and in their pending state they weep. The text uses that word with the same matter-of-factness it uses for everything else. The storehouses hold snow. The second heaven holds weeping angels. Neither one is presented as requiring more explanation than the other. Both are simply what those levels contain. You know what it is to wait for something that is already decided. You know what it is to be in the interval between the moment when something is determined and the moment when you have to live with the determination. The second heaven is the cosmological address of that interval. It is where beings who are in that state reside, not forever, but for the duration of whatever their duration is. There is grief here, but it is old grief, settled grief, the kind that has been in place long enough to stop being sharp and become, instead, a condition, the ambient condition of this level of the sky, as constant as the temperature in the snow treasuries, and as structural as the gates of the fourth heaven. Breathe. Let the second heaven be what it is. The prisoners see you as you pass through. They make their request. We know now what they want, and we know that Enoch agreed to deliver it, and we know what happened when he reached the court that was competent to hear it. They see a human being passing upward through their level, and they ask for intercession. Hold the image. Above the prison, the text says, "The light returns," and it returns as a garden. We are going to stay in the third heaven a little longer than the book does, because the specific details of the paradise passage deserve the time. Hold the image that has just arrived, the honey river. We're almost at the tree. One more level. Above the prison, the text says, "The light returns," and it returns as a garden. The third heaven is the one that splits readers, not because of what is in it, though what is in it is extraordinary, because of how much is in it. The third heaven, in 2 Enoch's map, contains two places, not two regions of the same place, not two ends of a spectrum, two places, fully realized, completely separate from each other, existing on the same level of the sky simultaneously. And the book seems to regard this as entirely natural, as if, of course, the third heaven contains both of these things, as if you should have expected exactly this. Let's go to the first place first, the place that is, beyond any question, the most beautiful passage in the entire text. Paradise. Enoch is brought to a place, and the book opens its language. The garden is enormous. The text uses words that suggest a space so large its edges are not visible. The light in it does not come from a sun or a moon. It is its own light, the kind that seems to originate from the objects themselves, rather than from any external source. The trees are unlike any trees he has seen on earth. The fruit on them is neither fully ripe nor unripe, but in a state of perfection that the earth does not have a category for, always at the exact moment of ripeness, always. And the streams. The book gives 4 streams flowing out of the garden, and it names what flows in each: honey in one, milk in another, oil in a third, wine in a fourth. Not water, not rivers of symbolic abstraction, specific liquids, rich and specific and sensory, flowing through a garden at the 3rd level of the sky. The honey stream is the one that catches me every time I read this passage. Something about honey as a flowing river, sweet enough to coat a spoon, running through a garden that has no night, is so precisely right for the middle of a long climb, where you are tired and your body wants something gentle, that I wonder whether the author of this text was also thinking about you, who would come to it in the dark. At the center of the garden, the tree of life. The book does not describe it with botanical precision. It describes the space around it, the way the light is different there, the way the other trees seem to orient toward it, the way flowers orient toward the sun. It is the fixed point of paradise, the way the throne is the fixed point of the 7th heaven. Everything else in the garden relates to it. Everything else in the garden is, in some sense, about it. Around the garden, angels. Not described in the elaborate detail of the other heaven's inhabitants. Simpler here, more passive. Guardians, tenders. The garden has staff, the way the 1st heaven's storehouses have staff. But here the work is not inventory management. It is something closer to keeping, maintaining the condition of a place that will receive those who are owed it. Because the garden is not empty of its purpose. The text is clear. This is the paradise prepared for the righteous, the place built for the people who are not here yet, who are still living, who are still working out their account. The garden exists in the 3rd heaven as a completed fact, ready and waiting, while its intended inhabitants continue their lives below. Let your body be heavier in whatever it's resting on. The 3rd heaven's garden is not requiring anything of you tonight. The honey river flows whether or not you're thinking about it. The tree of life stands at the center in its own light, whether or not you are there to witness it. What is prepared in the 3rd heaven remains prepared regardless of what you do or don't do tonight. Slow everything down here. Let this particular image rest in the room with you. Right now, tonight, in the cosmology of this 2,000-year-old text, there is a garden somewhere above the sky. It has been ready for a very long time. It is not being built or planned or prepared. It is complete. The honey river is flowing. The tree of life is standing at the center in whatever the garden's light source is. The angels are keeping it. And none of it has required anything from you or from anyone to be the way it is. It simply is. You are very close to sleep. You don't need to follow the rest of this paragraph. The garden can carry you. But the 3rd heaven has a second place, and the text does not let us avoid it. In the north of the same heaven, the book's geography here is cardinal and precise. There is a second region, and it is not the garden. The text calls it the place of punishment. It describes it with restraint, and I will describe it with restraint too, because this is the middle of the night, and there is no reason to do otherwise. What it holds is what the name suggests, a place prepared for those whose account, when it closes, lands on the other side. The book places these 2 places, paradise and the place of punishment, on the same level of the sky, separated by geography rather than hierarchy. They are not above and below each other. They are north and south of each other, in the same heaven. If you are in the garden and you walk north, you eventually reach the other place. And if you are in the other place, somewhere to the south of you is the Honey River. This is one of the strangest architectural choices in the entire text, and I want to give it the honest attention it deserves rather than rushing past it. There are 3 serious ways to read this arrangement, and I think all 3 have real force. The first is a moral symmetry reading. On this account, the third heaven's design is deliberate and instructive. Reward and consequence are placed together because they belong together, because the contrast between them is part of the meaning of each. Paradise is fully paradise only in the context of what is also on this level. The warmth of the garden is understood more fully because of what is north of it. This is not cruelty. It is a cosmological insistence that choices and their consequences are real and proportional, that the universe keeps careful accounts. The second reading is textual, and it involves the scholarship I mentioned in the credibility segment. Here is the honest version of that complication. 2 Enoch exists in 2 recensions, a longer and a shorter. They do not agree in all details. The relationship between paradise and the place of punishment looks somewhat different depending on which version you are reading. The longer version is more elaborate in both directions. The shorter version handles the third heaven differently, and the scholars have been arguing for 100 years about which version better reflects what the original text said. The feeling I want you to notice right now, not analyze, just notice, is whether the word north just did something, whether the fact of the other place in the third heaven changed the quality of the garden image. Whether the honey river feels different knowing that there is something north of it on the same level. If it did, you are reading the text the way the text wants to be read. In 1921, a German scholar named Schmidt proposed that the shorter version was more original. In 1952, the French scholar Vaillant published a major study arguing the same. In 1983, Francis Anderson's critical edition in the Charlesworth volumes, still the standard English scholarly reference, tried to navigate between them, presenting both versions and being honest about what can and cannot be determined. The argument has not been settled. Every detail of the third heaven that I described tonight is a detail from a text with this kind of history. Real, surviving, ancient, and genuinely contested in its specifics. This matters not to undermine the journey, but to honor it. The people who copied and kept this text were not creating a stable monument. They were doing something more interesting, keeping a tradition alive in the only way that traditions can be kept, by writing it down in the language they had, in the time they were living in, for reasons they believed in. The variations are evidence of that life. The third reading, the one I want to offer as a question and not an assertion, is the visionary reading. On this account, the proximity of paradise and punishment in the third heaven is not a theological statement, but a phenomenological one. This is what the visionary saw, or believed they saw, or structured their experience around. The geography of the third heaven is the geography of the specific imagination that produced this book, and it is worth taking that imagination seriously as an object in its own right, without deciding whether it corresponds to anything outside the text. None of this is accepted as literal cosmology by any mainstream scholar. What the scholars do agree on is stranger in its own way. Someone, around 2,000 years ago, needed this map to be complete, needed the third heaven to contain both of those places, needed the garden and the other place to be on the same level, separated by a cardinal direction, so that a man carried upward by 2 angels could see both of them in the same breath. The need that produced that design is the interesting thing, and the need is real regardless of what the design corresponds to. Let me say more about the Paradise passage, because the text gives us more than I have mentioned and it is worth dwelling in. The streams of honey and milk and oil and wine are not the only specific sensory details in the Paradise section of 2 Enoch. The text also describes the fragrance of the garden, a perfume that it says cannot be compared to any fragrance on earth, that does not have an earthly category. The garden smells of something that has no name in any human language, because no human being has smelled it before. The text attempts the analogy anyway, because what else can it do? And the result is the gesture of a writer reaching for a comparison they know is inadequate, better than the sweetest perfume. more lasting than the most enduring scent, present throughout the garden without a visible source. The light detail is similarly precise. Paradise has its own light, not reflected, not borrowed, not dependent on the sun or any external source. The text says the light in the garden is simply there, as fundamental to the place as the ground or the air. It is not a light that could be switched off. It is constitutive. The garden is bright in the same way that fire is hot, not because something is shining on it, but because it is the kind of place that has that property. And the tree of life at the center. The text circles it without landing on it directly, the way you circle something important when you are not sure the available language can handle a direct approach. What it does say, the tree is larger than anything in the garden. It extends above the canopy of the other trees, the way a mountain extends above the surrounding hills. Its branches spread in all directions. Its roots go down past the visible soil into something the text cannot measure. And it is alive in a way that the text distinguishes from the aliveness of the other trees. Alive with a quality of permanence that the other trees, for all their perfection, do not have. They are eternal because they are in the eternal garden. The tree of life is eternal because it is the tree of life. Someone is appointed to the garden who is not one of the guardian angels. This figure appears in the longer ascension more fully than in the shorter, and is sometimes identified with an archangel, sometimes simply described as the keeper. The keeper of the garden does not create the honey, or produce the fruit, or tend the tree. The garden does not need that kind of attention. The keeper simply maintains the condition of readiness. The garden is always prepared for its intended inhabitants, always set for the reception of those who have been assigned to it, and the keeper's work is to ensure that the preparation is continuous, that the garden is not allowed to become anything other than what it is. Think about the labor implied by that. A garden that needs to be kept in a state of perfect readiness for inhabitants who have not yet arrived. Not for a century, not for a millennium, for however long it takes for all the people assigned to it to complete their lives below and make their way up. The keeper of the third heaven's paradise is keeping it ready for everyone who will ever be assigned to it, including the people who have not been born yet, whose time in the garden is contingent on events that have not yet occurred. Your eyes are probably closed, or nearly. The third heaven's particular quality, warmth and shadow, the garden and its counterpart, is a good resting place. You don't have to resolve the tension between them. The book doesn't resolve it either. Both are simply there, on the same level, and tonight that is enough. That is a very specific kind of waiting. Your body knows about waiting. Whatever you are waiting for, whatever the open question is in your life at this hour, whatever the thing is that has not yet resolved, the keeper of the garden is also waiting for something specific and personal to you, in a garden that has been ready for longer than your life has existed. I'm not asserting that cosmologically. I'm describing what the text implies and what it feels like to hold that implication in the dark at this hour. The feeling is real, regardless of what the text corresponds to. Now the north, the other place. I want to be honest about why the text puts it here. The third heaven's architecture, paradise in the south, punishment in the north, is not an accident. The text is not simply using a convenient organizing principle. In the biblical world, and in the Near Eastern world more broadly, the north carried specific associations. It was the direction of cold, of storm, of whatever was difficult and threatening. The northern wind was the harsh wind. The north was the direction from which enemies came, in the Psalms and the prophets. Putting the place of punishment in the north of the third heaven is a cosmological reflex of an older geographical imagination. The difficult things are in the north. But what makes the third heaven's architecture so unusual is not the presence of the place of punishment. Many ancient cosmologies include a place of punishment. What makes it unusual is the proximity. They are on the same level, in the same heaven. They share a location coordinate, the third, even though their cardinal positions within that location are opposite. If you think of the third heaven as a territory, paradise and the place of punishment are on the same piece of land, separated only by how far north or south you walk. The book does not explain this. It does not offer a reason for the design. It simply presents it as the fact of the third heaven and moves on, which means you is left to supply the reason, or to decide there is no reason, only the design, and to hold both the garden and the other place on the same level, in the same heaven, as a single fact. Both things exist. Both are true. Both are here, in the third level of the sky, at the same altitude. The honey river and the other place. The tree of life and the northern region. The fragrance with no earthly category, and whatever the corresponding atmosphere is in the north. The book does not pick. It shows you both and climbs past them. 2 levels above us now, there is a heaven where nothing sings. Remember that silence. We will need it when we arrive there. For now, above the garden, the book says, the machinery begins. The 4th heaven is where the text stops describing places and starts describing traffic. The 4th heaven is the largest heaven Enoch visits by the measure of what it contains. And what it contains is everything the ancient world meant when it said the word cosmos. Here is what I mean. The 4th heaven is the heaven of the luminaries, the sun, the moon, the stars in their courses. In the cosmological model that 2 Enoch inherits, the heavenly bodies do not simply exist in the sky. They travel, they follow roads. The sun has a route it takes, a specific path from the eastern gates where it rises to the western gates where it sets, with stops and turns and measured distances. The moon has a different route, a more complicated one, because the moon's relationship to the sun is more complicated. The stars have their assigned paths too, each one following a track that has been laid for it from the beginning. The 4th heaven is where those roads are, where the gates are, where the turning points are, and where, most importantly, the machinery of timekeeping lives. The book describes the gates of the 4th heaven with extraordinary precision. There are 6 gates in the east and 6 in the west, 1 pair for each month of the year, so that the sun's course shifts slightly month by month, entering and leaving through a different pair of gates as the year progresses. The angels who operate the gates are the timekeepers of the world. They are why January feels different from July. They are why the light on a winter morning is not the same quality as the light on a summer one. The angle of the gate determines the angle of the sun's path, and the angle of the sun's path determines the season, and the season determines what the fields do, and what the rivers do, and what the bodies of everyone living below do in response. The 4th heaven, in other words, is where the year is made. Enoch watches the sun travel its 4th heaven road, and the text pauses to describe the escort. This is the passage that almost no popular retelling includes, one of the most specific and most visually strange images in the whole book. The sun does not travel alone. The sun's chariot, because the text gives it a chariot, a vehicle appropriate to its station, is escorted by 4 beings that the text calls phoenixes and chalkidri. The names alone are remarkable. Phoenix you may recognize. Chalkidri is a compound word that seems to mean something like copper serpent, and the description in the text makes it stranger still. 12 wings each, the body of a crocodile, and as the chariot moves through the 4th heaven, from the rising gates in the east toward the setting gates in the west, these 12-winged crocodile creatures sing. They sing to the sun, every morning, every circuit, the same song, a hymn of praise to the light that the escort carries, a musical accompaniment to the most reliable fact in the natural world. The sun rises every morning, not in silence, but in this, a song from 12 winged creatures that look like nothing in any natural history you have ever read. Stay with the image a moment before you let it go. Every sunrise you have ever seen, Every morning you have woken to a brightening window. Every time you have stepped outside and felt the particular quality of early light. This text says that those moments were accompanied by singing from beings you could not see. The light came with a chorus. It has always come with a chorus. The chorus exists whether or not anyone below knows it is there. That is a very particular kind of gift for a text to give its reader in the middle of the night. The idea that the ordinary processes of the world are not ordinary to the world that runs them. The sun rises every day. The singing happens every day. The fact that most of us can't hear it doesn't change the sound. And the longer version of this book, the longer recension that I mentioned in the credibility segment, the one that some scholars believe more closely resembles the original, does not stop at 7 heavens. Remember that. We will climb past the 7th, in that version, before the night is over. The 4th heaven's machinery is beautiful and complex, and the text gives us enough of it to understand the principle, even if we can't follow every gear. It is a heaven of order, the most precisely ordered heaven in the sequence. Everything here operates by schedule, by measurement, by the assignment of specific functions to specific beings who have done their specific jobs without interruption since the beginning. Let the 4th heaven be what it is, a clockwork the size of the sky, running perfectly, attended by crocodile creatures with 12 wings, singing at every rotation. Your breath is the evidence that you are in the part of the sky where breath is still required. Below the 4th heaven's gates, below the sun's road, below the place where the chalkydri sing at every dawn, you are in the position that makes the 4th heaven possible to describe. You are where the light arrives after it passes through the gate. Now the book carries us higher. The 5th heaven is silent. That is the first and defining thing about it. After the song of the 4th heaven, after the chorus of the sun's escort, the 5th heaven is a place where nothing is making any sound. The contrast is deliberate. The text has not forgotten what the 4th heaven contained. The silence of the 5th is constructed against the music of the 4th, so that the silence is the loudest thing about it. And in that silence, soldiers. The book gives them a specific name. They are called the Grigori, which is the Greek word for watchers. The same word, the same category, as the watchers of the other tradition. If you have spent a previous night with the Book of the Watchers, with the 200 who descended on Mount Hermon, who taught the forbidden arts, whose children were the giants, then you know this name, and you know what these beings were before they fell, before the 200 made their choice on the mountain. The Grigori of the 5th heaven did not descend. They remained. They are the ones who stayed, and they are grieving. The text describes them as enormous, larger than any figure the other heavens have shown him, and as withered. Not physically diminished in the way a plant is withered by drought, but diminished in a different sense, dimmed. Their faces are turned downward. They are silent. They are in a posture that the text can only describe as grief, and the grief is so established, so settled, so deep in them, that it has become their condition rather than their emotion. They are not actively weeping the way the prisoners in the 2nd heaven were weeping. They are in a state past weeping, the aftermath of grief, where the crying has stopped, not because the pain has stopped, but because there is simply nothing left to do. And the reason for their grief is not hidden in the text. It is stated plainly. They grieve for their brothers, the ones who did descend, the ones who made the choice on the mountain, the ones who are now imprisoned in the 2nd heaven in chains and darkness. The Grigori who stayed are witnesses to the consequences of the choice their brothers made, and they are living with that witnessing, in silence, in the 5th heaven, for as long as the punishment of their brothers continues. Enoch watches them. He does not speak first. Then, the book says, he does something that is one of the most human moments in the entire ascent. And by human, I mean something specific. He speaks to them. He does not have authority over them. He is a mortal human being in a heaven full of beings who are categorically not mortal human beings. The size difference alone should make the gesture absurd, enormous, ancient, grieving creatures, and a man 365 years old, carried to their level on the wings of two visitors. And what does he do? He urges them to take up their liturgy again. He encourages them to sing. If you're still awake at this point in the night, and I'm glad if you are, and glad if you're drifting, both are exactly right. I want to ask you something before the fifth heaven does what it does next. Is there a sound from your childhood that you'd recognize anywhere, no matter what was happening, no matter how much time had passed? A song, or a voice, or just a particular quality of sound in a particular room? Leave it in the comments below. I read every one of them. What happens next in the fifth heaven is the passage I have thought about most in all my time with this text. The Grigori hear Enoch. The book does not tell us whether they look up at first or whether they seem to hear him, or what the interval is between his words and their response. What it tells us is the result. The silent soldiers of the fifth heaven take up their liturgy again. They sing. The heaven that had been quiet since their brothers fell, silent for however long a celestial grief extends in time, begins to make sound. And the sound it makes is their proper function, the one they had stopped performing in the aftermath of their brother's departure: praise. The continuous hymn of the fifth heaven, the one that had been interrupted by the fall of the 200, resumes, because a human being asked them to. Let the fourth heaven's clockwork be what it is, a mechanism the size of the year, turning without error, producing the light you have been living in your entire life. Every spring you have ever felt arrive, every quality of late afternoon you have associated with a particular memory, every morning that surprised you by being beautiful when you expected it to be ordinary. The gate shifted, the angle changed. Someone opened the right door. Hold that. A human being asked them to, and it worked. Enoch, not an archangel, not a divine figure, not a being of any particular cosmic authority, simply spoke to beings of an entirely different order of existence, and what he said was enough to move them. The silence ended, the song returned. And this is precisely the inversion of what happened in the other tradition's most important scene. If you remember the night we spent with one Enoch in the Book of Giants, the petition scene, Mahaway's journey, Enoch carrying the message to the fallen watchers, in that tradition, the fallen angels asked a human being to pray for them, and the human carried their petition to the divine court. The petition was refused. The direction of that flow was angels to human to divine authority, and the answer was no. In the fifth heaven of Tut Enoch, the direction inverts. A human being, Enoch, addresses the angels without being asked. He takes the initiative. He urges them, and the answer is yes. Same tradition, same hero, same kind of being, different direction, different outcome. I don't know what to make of that inversion, and I am not going to tell you what to make of it. What I know is that it's there, and that the text seems to know it's there too, seems to have designed the fifth heaven specifically to contain this moment, this reversal of the petition's flow. The fifth heaven is singing now. We go up. The sixth heaven is the heaven of administration. I use that word intentionally, knowing it sounds less romantic than the other levels. But the sixth heaven in Tut Enoch's map is genuinely the place where the world is managed, where the information that governs everything that happens below is gathered, processed, and acted upon, and the only honest word for that function is administration. 7 bands of angels. The text arranges them in bands, groups, orders, ranks, each with a specific portfolio. The first band governs the stars. The second regulates the seasons, not just what the seasons are, but when they arrive, and how long they last, and what happens in the natural world as they turn. The third band manages the rivers, the great rivers, the ones whose behavior determines what grows and who lives, and where the cities can be built. The fourth band tends the vegetation of the world, and so on through the seventh band, But the sixth heaven's most important function, the one the text emphasizes, the one that distinguishes the sixth heaven from the orderly machinery of the fourth, is the final band's work. The final band of angels in the sixth heaven are recorders. They are the ones keeping account of every human soul. Not the deeds, the souls. The text is careful to say souls, the whole person, not just the ledger of actions. Each human life is being recorded in the sixth heaven, and the recording is comprehensive. Not a summary, not a highlights reel, but the whole thing. Every thought, apparently. Every decision, every moment of the kind that no one who lived it would expect anyone to have noticed. Someone noticed. Someone in the sixth heaven has been noticing all of it, the whole time. Your breathing has changed since the beginning of tonight. The room around you is quieter than it was. What you did today, the difficult thing, the ordinary thing, the thing you are still thinking about at this hour, the sixth heaven's recorders have it. Whatever your accounting looks like, it is being kept carefully. That is either a comfort or a discomfort, depending on what kind of night you are having. And both responses are honest. The sixth heaven is busy in the way that a very large organization is busy. Constantly, without drama, without apparent urgency, with the kind of steady institutional attention that outlasts any individual. The angels of the sixth heaven have been doing this for a very long time. They will continue doing it. The recording does not pause because a person is sleeping. The record keeps moving forward. Enoch watches all of this. He does not speak in the sixth heaven the way he spoke in the fifth. He has already done the thing in the fifth heaven that he was going to do, the urging, the song, the inversion of the petition. And now he is simply present, observing, letting the sixth heaven show him what it is. If you are still following at this point in the night, rest your hands. The fifth heaven's moment is the one I want you to carry from tonight. Of all the moments the book contains, not the anointing, that's coming. Not the paradise, we've already been there. The fifth heaven's moment, a human being asking enormous grieving creatures to do the thing they were built to do, and the enormous grieving creatures doing it. And here, very close to the sixth heaven's ceiling, a memory surfaces. The prisoners in the second heaven, the weeping angels in chains, who saw him passing and reached toward him. They asked him something.
I believe we have reached a fair agreement.
The text has been holding that question in reserve since the second heaven.
Yes,
now,
this is a historic
sixth,
moment for
with
both
the
our
recording
nations.
angels around him and the fifth heaven's song still theoretically audible below. The text pays it back. What the prisoners asked Enoch, what they wanted from the human being ascending through their level, was intercession. They wanted him to pray for them. They wanted him to carry their petition upward, to deliver it to the court where judgments are made, to ask on their behalf. Enoch, the text says, agreed to pray for them. And then the escorts, who have been with him since the beginning, who have carried him through all six heavens, stop. They stop because they have reached a threshold they do not cross. Let me say more about the fourth heaven's timekeeping, because the text is unusually specific here, and the specificity is worth inhabiting. The gates of the fourth heaven, 6 in the east, 6 in the west, correspond to the 12 months of the year. Each month the sun rises and sets through a different pair of gates. In January, it uses the southernmost pair, the ones that produce the low, slanted winter light. In June, it uses the northernmost pair, the ones that produce the high, direct summer light. Month by month, the sun's path shifts, entering a slightly different gate on the eastern wall, exiting through the corresponding gate on the western wall. The angles are not identical. The light is not identical. The season is produced by the gate. This is not metaphor, or rather, it is metaphor and it is meant. The text is using the language of architecture, gates, walls, doors, to describe something it does not have more precise language for. But the underlying idea is real. The quality of light changes through the year because of something about the geometry of the sky, and that geometry is managed by beings who operate the gates. The gatekeepers of the fourth heaven are, in an important sense, why spring feels different from autumn. They are why the light on a late September afternoon has that specific quality of angle and warmth that the light of a late March afternoon does not quite duplicate. The gate has shifted, a different pair, a different angle, a different season. And the angels who manage the gates do not vary their work by season. They are on the job in winter the same way they are on the job in summer, with the same attention, the same precision, the same commitment to the timetable. The gates open and close on schedule. The sun goes through. The light falls on the world at the assigned angle. The world below experiences this as weather and season and the quality of afternoon light, without knowing that anyone manages it. The sun's course through the fourth heaven is a journey in the most literal sense. The text gives it a starting point and an ending point, and a duration and an escort. The escort is the part that makes the fourth heaven's description the most memorable passage in the book for most readers who encounter it, because the escort is so specifically, peculiarly imagined that it is impossible to forget once you have read it. 12 winged creatures, crocodile bodies. The name Chalkidri, copper serpents, in the most literal translation of the Greek compound. They are not described in any other text in the same way. They are not a standard feature of ancient cosmological literature. They are specific to 2 Enoch, which gives them the name and the description, and then proceeds as if, of course, you knew what Chalkidri were, as if this were perfectly standard information about the celestial escort of the sun. The text says they sing at dawn, not that they sing in general, or that they sometimes sing. They sing specifically at dawn, specifically at the moment when the sun's chariot passes through the eastern gates and begins its daily course. It is a ritual, a morning ritual that has been performed every morning since the sun first traveled this road. A chorus of 12 winged crocodile creatures greeting the light the way a choir greets a processional. Every dawn in human history was accompanied by this. Every morning you have woken to a brightening window. Every sunrise over a field, a mountain, a city rooftop, an ocean, had this happening at the level above it. The Chalkidri do not take days off. They do not adjust their schedule for human preference. The sun rises, they sing. Every time, always. There is a quality to that kind of reliability. A thing that happens every time, that has always happened, that will keep happening, that is its own form of comfort in the middle of the night. The dawn is not an accident, it is not a surprise. Something specific is coming, the same thing that came yesterday, and the day before, and 10,000 days before that, and the Chalkidri know the words. Your breath, the room, the particular quality of dark around you right now, which is the particular quality of the hours before the dawn you will eventually experience. That dawn is already in preparation. The gates are already aligned for the morning you will wake to. The Chalkidri are already in position. I want to give the fifth heaven more space than I gave it in the first pass, because the scene that happens here, Enoch urging the Grigori to sing, deserves the attention that the text gives it. You know what it is to be asked, at the right moment, to return to something you had stopped, a practice, a habit, a version of yourself that had gone quiet. You know what it feels like when the asking comes from someone who noticed the absence without being told about it. The Grigori knew. The book does not describe their faces. It does not need to. The Grigori of the fifth heaven are described in a way that distinguishes them from all the other angelic populations Enoch has encountered. They are not in chains, like the second heaven's prisoners. They are not at their posts, like the fourth heaven's gatekeepers or the sixth heaven's recording angels. They are not in any specific functional posture. They are simply there, in the fifth heaven, in a condition the text can only describe through its effect. Silence, downcast faces, the posture of beings who have stopped doing the thing they were built to do. They are grieving, but the grief has a specific object. It is not generalized grief. the diffuse unhappiness of beings in a difficult situation. It is directional grief. Grief for the specific others, the specific brothers, who made the specific choice on the specific mountain that they did not make. The grief points at the 200. Every moment of the Grigori's silence is a moment spent being aware of what the 200 chose and what happened to them as a result. The fifth heaven is the view from inside that awareness. Notice what the Grigori chose by staying. They did not stay because staying was costless. They stayed in the knowledge that their brothers were going down, and they stayed anyway. The choice to remain in the fifth heaven, to continue the liturgy, to not descend, that choice had a cost. The cost was witnessing. They had to keep watching from above, as the consequences of the 200's choice played out, level by level, over millennia. They had to keep being in the fifth heaven, with their function intact, and their brothers in chains in the second heaven, and hold both facts at the same time. That is why the grief became silence. The liturgy stopped because the liturgy felt impossible to perform under the weight of what was happening to the ones who had chosen differently. The song stopped when the grief started. The causal relationship is implied rather than stated, but it is there. And then a human being shows up. Enoch arrives in the fifth heaven the way he has arrived in every other heaven, carried, escorted, observing. He is not sent to the fifth heaven with a mission. He is not instructed to address the Grigori. What the text implies is that he sees them, he understands something about their condition, and he speaks from that understanding. He urges them to take up their liturgy again. The nature of the urging matters. The text does not give us Enoch's words verbatim, it gives us the result. We don't know whether he appealed to their duty, or their dignity, or something else. We don't know whether he argued that the 200's punishment was, in some sense, being addressed, that the chains and the dark of the second heaven were a response to what happened, that the cosmic order was managing the situation. We don't know whether he simply said, "You should sing." What we know is that it worked. This is the moment in the text that I think requires the most careful attention of anything tonight, because of what it implies about the relationship between a human being and the beings of the heavenly world. The assumption of most ancient religion, and most modern religion for that matter, is that the traffic runs primarily from the divine toward the human. The divine decides, the human receives. The divine acts, the human experiences the consequences. The divine speaks, the human listens. The hierarchy is clear, and the human is far down it. The fifth heaven of 2 Enoch disrupts this assumption in the most specific, local, concrete way possible. It does not argue against the hierarchy generally. It does not produce a theological treatise on human dignity. It simply presents a situation, enormous grieving ancient beings who have stopped doing what they were built to do, and then presents a human being who notices this and says something about it, and then presents the enormous grieving ancient beings resuming what they had stopped doing. The human noticed, the human spoke, the ancient beings responded. The sequence is too specific to be accidental. The text put Enoch in the fifth heaven and gave the Grigori their specific condition, and then gave Enoch the specific act of urging, rather than, say, an archangel doing it, or a divine command doing it, or the grief simply resolving on its own, because the sequence is the point. A human being matters in the fifth heaven, not as a superior. Enoch is not superior to the Grigori in any scale of being, as something else, as a witness who cares about what he witnesses, as a voice that counted when a voice was what was needed. The fifth heaven is singing now. Listen to what that means. A heaven that had been silent, silent for as long as its brothers had been in chains, which is as long as the world has been the world, is making sound again. The liturgy that was interrupted by grief is resuming because a mortal human being, ascending through the heavens on borrowed wings, said something to the ones who had stopped. Whatever the cosmological status of any of this, the human moment is real. The human moment has always been the most real thing in this book. The recording angels of the sixth heaven are at work right now, at this hour, above wherever you are lying. Your account is being kept. Whatever happened today, the thing you did that you're proud of, the thing you're still turning over, the conversation that ended differently than you intended, it is in the record. The record is comprehensive and the record is careful. You don't have to do anything with that information tonight. Just let it be true. The sixth heaven's administration deserves more attention than ascent literature usually gives it, because it is the most socially recognizable heaven in the map. The sixth heaven does not have the first heaven's calming domesticity, or the third heaven's paradise, or the fifth heaven's emotional intensity, or the seventh heaven's transfiguration. What it has is work, ongoing, careful, comprehensive work, and work of a very specific kind. 7 bands of radiant angels, the text says. 7 groups, each with a portfolio, each with a specific responsibility for a specific category of the world. What I want to emphasize is not the list itself. I've given you the list, but the implication of the list. The implication is everything is tended, not some things, not the important things, everything. The seasons are tended, not just that they arrive on schedule, but that what they do to the world is monitored and managed. The rivers are tended, not just their flow, but their behavior, their flooding and receding, their relationship to the land around them. The vegetation is tended, not just the crops, but all vegetation. The grass of the plains, the moss on the rocks, the plants in places no human eye ever reaches, the ones that grow and die without any human noticing. All of it is within the sixth heaven's portfolio. All of it is assigned. And then the seventh band, the recorders. Every human soul, not every notable human soul, not every saint or sinner or person of historical significance, every human soul, the person who lived and died and whose name is not in any historical record, whose birth was noted by no one but the family, whose death was mourned and forgotten, is in the sixth heaven's records, the complete account, every moment, everything. Your breathing changed again just now. You know it did. The thought of being recorded, completely, comprehensively, by beings in the sixth heaven who have been doing this since the beginning, produces a specific kind of response. I have watched this happen to myself every time I sit with this passage, and I will describe both responses honestly, because both are honest. One response is relief. Someone has been paying attention. The things that happened that no one saw, that no history would record, that the world processed and forgot, they are in the sixth heaven's archive. The careful thing you did when no one was watching, the difficult thing you managed, the ordinary day that was, in fact, extraordinary in ways you could not have articulated at the time. Someone has that. The other response is discomfort. The things you would rather not have recorded are also in there. The sixth heaven does not make editorial decisions about what deserves to be preserved. It records. The complete account is complete. Both responses are real. Both are available to you tonight. The text does not resolve the tension between them, and I am not going to try to resolve it for you. The sixth heaven simply has the records. What you do with knowing that is your own matter. Let the sixth heaven do what it does. The recording continues whether or not you think about it. The seventh band of angels is at work right now, at this hour, in whatever the sixth heaven is above wherever you are lying. Your account is being kept. It has always been kept. It will continue to be kept. The escorts have stopped. They are at a threshold they do not cross. From here, for the first time since the ascent began, for the first time since the wings of the 2 visitors spread beneath him and the first heaven opened, Enoch goes up alone. From here, Enoch goes alone. No escort, no guide, just the ascending figure and the sixth heaven's ceiling and whatever is above it. The text says, he went alone, and then it describes what he found. From here, the text says, Enoch goes up alone. And what waits in the seventh heaven is the reason this book was hidden, copied, condemned, and kept for 2,000 years. The seventh heaven begins with fire, not the metaphorical fire of religious experience, not the fire of dramatic writing. The text's fire, placed at the entrance to the seventh heaven, between Enoch and the throne, between the ascending mortal and the thing he is ascending toward. He has come through 6 levels of increasing radiance, and now, at the 7th, there is fire that does not burn. The text places it there plainly, as a fact. This is what is at the top of the climb. The escorts have stopped. The 6th heaven is behind you, and in front of you, above you, is a place that the text approaches with the only vocabulary that seems to remain when vocabulary fails: fire, and light, and fire again, and then a light beyond the fire that makes the fire look like shadow. The 7th heaven is where the ascent literature of the ancient world always runs out of ordinary words. This is not a flaw in the literature. It is the literature telling you something true. There are things at the top of the climb that resist the kind of language that worked perfectly well on the way up. The text does not pretend otherwise. It reaches for the most extreme images in the language, and then, having deployed them, acknowledges that even those images are not enough. What Enoch sees first, approaching the 7th heaven, is the ranks. The hosts of the highest heaven are arranged in layers, hierarchical, vast, each layer more radiant than the one below it. The text names them the seraphim, the cherubim, the ophanim, the wheels, the archangels, the armies of the divine court. These are not the administrative angels of the 6th heaven, or the regulatory angels of the 4th, or the grieving soldiers of the 5th. These are the beings closest to the center of everything the text believes in, and they have been arranged here, in the 7th heaven, the way a court arranges itself around a throne, because there is a throne. The text describes it through what surrounds it rather than directly. Fire approaches it and cannot reach it. Light approaches it and does not reduce it. The beings nearest it, the seraphim, the cherubim, move around it in continuous motion, in continuous praise, covering their faces in the way that beings cover their faces when they cannot look directly at what they are serving. The throne is the center of the 7th heaven, the way the tree of life is the center of the 3rd heaven's garden. Everything else relates to it. Everything else is organized in reference to it. Everything else takes its meaning from its proximity or distance. And on the throne, the text calls it the Great Glory. Not a description, a title, or something more than a title, a designation, a way of pointing at something that cannot be described by saying what it is. The Great Glory is what is on the throne. That is as far as the text goes, and that restraint, coming from a book that has been specific about everything, that gave you the chariot and the chalky-dree and the 12-winged crocodile creatures and the honey river and the exact names of the Grigori, that specific restraint at this specific moment is itself a statement. The 7th heaven is where specificity stops working. There is a parallel tradition that is worth bringing in here, honestly and with attribution. In 1 Enoch 14, the older book, the one we travelled in a previous night, there is a vision of the summit of the ascent that uses different language to describe what may be the same experience. In that tradition, what Enoch sees at the top is a house within a house. The outer house made of crystal, the inner house made of fire. Fire that was alive, that gave heat without burning, that was self-sustaining. The great tongue of fire at the center of the inner house, and on the throne above the fire, a figure that the text cannot describe except by saying it was so bright that no angel could see it. 2 Enochs, 2 books, 2 maps, but at the top of both maps, fire, light, a throne, and something that the language of both traditions meets and then goes quiet. Your breathing is different now than it was when we began. The room around you has settled into the particular quality that rooms reach very late at night, when the sounds outside have changed, when the air has cooled, when the things that were worrying you 3 hours ago have loosened their grip, at least a little. You are at altitude. The seventh heaven is close. Now comes the moment the whole ascent has been built toward, the moment that is the reason the text was written, and the reason it was kept, and the reason it is being read at this hour in the dark of wherever you are. Michael appears. Michael, the archangel, the highest of the attending figures in the court of the seventh heaven, is given an instruction. The text records it plainly. He is told to remove Enoch's earthly clothing, not as humiliation, not as punishment, as preparation. The earthly clothing is the clothing of a mortal, the garment that corresponds to the condition of the body below, to the life that has been lived at ground level, to the identity that belongs to the world Enoch came from. Michael removes it, and the removal is an act of care, an act of welcome. The text is very clear about the register. This is not a stripping. It is an undressing of the kind that precedes something better. And then, the anointing. One of the angels brings oil. The text describes it with the two most extreme comparisons it has. The fragrance of it is like myrrh. The light of it is greater than the greatest light. It is an oil that participates in both categories of extreme, sensory and luminous, as if the substance itself is not quite one thing or another, but something at the boundary between matter and light. Michael anoints Enoch with this oil. And then the text does the thing that has made this passage one of the most discussed in all of the pseudepigrapha. Enoch looks at himself. After the anointing, after the removal of the earthly clothing, after the oil that is like myrrh and greater than light, he looks at himself, and what he sees is, he has become like one of the glorious ones. That is the text's phrase, like one of the glorious ones. And then, quietly, with the understatement of a sentence that knows it is carrying more than its words can hold, there was no observable difference. Half speed here. This is the payload of the entire ascent, and the night around you has been building toward it since the man asleep in his bed woke to find the two enormous faces above him. Whatever you make of the theology, whatever framework you use to hold the text, the sentence is in the script, and it has been in the script for 2,000 years. No observable difference. Someone needed to write that sentence. The need is real. Between Enoch and the beings of the seventh heaven, there was no observable difference. Half speed here. This is the payload of the entire ascent. A human being, mortal, time-bound, earth-descended, arrived from below with 6 heavens worth of journey behind him, has been transformed by the oil and the garment of glory, and whatever the act of anointing in the seventh heaven corresponds to, into something indistinguishable from the beings who live here. Not similar, not inspired, not improved, indistinguishable. The text does not over-explain this. It does not interpret it theologically or cosmologically or philosophically. It simply states the result and moves on, no observable difference, as if the transformation were the point, and the point is now made, and there is nothing left to add. Hold the sentence. No observable difference. We will spend the last part of tonight coming back to it, not to explain it further, but to let it do what it was designed to do in this specific hour. Let that rest in the room with you. However you hold the question of what this text is describing, vision, theology, mystical experience, literary construction, something else, the sentence is there, no observable difference. Someone, 2,000 years ago, believed that a human being could become that, believed it with enough conviction to write it down, believed it with enough care that the sentence they wrote is this quiet, no observable difference, not a shout, a statement. And then the dictation begins. The archangel Vrevoal, a name found in this text and almost nowhere else, One of the strangely specific details that mark 2 Enoch as a document with a very particular imagination is appointed to sit with Enoch and read to him from the books of the divine library. The books that contain the knowledge of creation, how the world was made, how it works, what the principles are, what the deep mechanics are beneath the surface. Vrevoil reads, Enoch writes, 30 days and 30 nights, without stopping, without sleeping. Because at this point, sleep is a different thing. The 30 days of Enoch's return, the window between the 7th heaven and the permanent departure, contain the most ordinary and most moving scene in the entire book. We are almost at it. Now, the number I asked you to hold at the beginning of the credibility segment. I said hold it. I said we'd need it later. I said it was 366. Here it is. The books that Enoch writes during his 30 days with Vrevoil, the complete record of what he is told in the 7th heaven, number 366. 366. The number of days in the Enochic year, the solar year, the year of 365 days plus the intercalary day that makes it complete. And also, the text has been telling us this since the opening, the number of years of Enoch's life before the 2 visitors appeared at his bed. He wrote a book for every year he lived, or every year he lived prepared him for a book he would write. The text allows both readings simultaneously, the way good texts usually do. And now I want to pay something else I planted hours ago. I said the longer version of this book does not stop at 7 heavens. Here, in the account of what Vrevoil reads to Enoch, the longer recension gives us the names of the heavens above the 7th. The 8th heaven is called Musaloth, a name connected to the zodiac, to the constellations that serve as the marker system of the year. The 9th heaven is called Kuchavim, the stars. The 10th heaven, the top of the map in the longer version, the absolute summit, is called Aravoth. And in Aravoth, the longer text says, Enoch is shown something he cannot describe, a face, a presence, something at the top of 10 levels of sky that makes the 7th heaven's throne look like an anteroom. Let the room be what it is. Let your body be what it has become over the last 2 hours. Slower, heavier, more willing. The oil in the text has a fragrance. The fragrance has no earthly category. The light has no external source. Whatever those descriptions correspond to, they were written down carefully by someone who believed they corresponded to something, and they have been sitting in the record, in whatever the record is, since before your great-grandmother's grandmother was born. The shorter version stops at 7. The longer version keeps climbing to 10. The scholars cannot agree which version is more original. What this means for the journey we've been on tonight is this. The map we've been following may be a partial map. There may be more above the 7th heaven than the 7th heaven shows. The version that some scholars consider older draws 3 more levels above the one where Enoch was anointed. Whether those levels are original or added later, whether the 10 heaven cosmos is more original than the 7 heaven one, is genuinely, honestly, professionally undecided. Both possibilities are real. Both versions exist. The honest thing to do is tell you both. One last note before we begin the return. I said there would be a safety valve in this segment, and here it is. None of what I have described tonight, no heaven, no prisoner, no paradise, no throne, no anointing oil, no transformation, is accepted as literal description by any mainstream scholarship. No cosmologist places a treasury of snow in the sky above the clouds. No theologian working in the tradition of any major religion accepts the geography of the 7 heavens as a physical fact. What the scholars do accept is that these ideas were real and that the people who produced them meant them. The tradition of ascent through heavenly levels was widespread in the Jewish and early Christian world of the first centuries. The texts that preserved these ideas deserve serious engagement as documents of what human beings have believed about the structure of the world above them. The approach to the 7th heaven is the longest approach in the ascent, not because of the physical distance. The The text does not measure distances in miles or hours, because of what the approach requires, a preparation of the self for what is at the end of it, and a preparation that cannot be done quickly, because what is at the end of it resists quick preparation. The ranks begin before the throne is visible. Enoch is still rising through the outer levels of the seventh heaven when the first rank appears, the most distant ring of the divine court, the ones furthest from the center. Even they are almost unbearably bright compared to the six heavens below. The light of the sixth heaven was the light of radiant beings at work. The light of the seventh heaven's outermost ring is something categorically different. Not brighter in the way that a summer day is brighter than an overcast one. Brighter in the way that a fire is brighter than the light it throws on a wall. The seraphim, the cherubim, the ophanim. The text names them in the order of their proximity to the throne. The ophanim, the wheels, are the ones the book of Ezekiel described in one of the Hebrew Bible's most difficult and most repeated visions. Wheels within wheels, covered with eyes, moving in all four directions simultaneously, without turning. The cherubim are the ones who flank the places of holiness in the temple tradition, who guard what is too sacred to be approached without mediation. The seraphim are the ones who in Isaiah's vision cried, "Holy, holy, holy," to each other in the smoke of the temple, covering their faces and their feet with four of their six wings. All of them are here. All of them are present in the seventh heaven's court, arranged in the hierarchy of their proximity to the throne. And all of them are, in their specific ways, doing what the sixth heaven's recording angels do, except that what they record and what they produce and what they sustain is not the account of human souls. It is the continuous acknowledgement of what is on the throne. The word the text uses for the throne, or what is on the throne, is the great glory. I want to dwell on that phrase because it is doing something more than pointing at the object. A glory, in the Hebrew tradition, is a specific kind of divine presence. The Hebrew word kavod, sometimes translated glory, sometimes translated heaviness or weight, sometimes translated the presence. It is not the abstract concept of magnificence. It is the specific quality of the divine that makes itself felt, that has weight in the world, that produces the specific response of prostration and covering one's face in people and beings who encounter it. The great glory is the greatest concentration of this quality that exists anywhere, and the fire. Before the throne, fire that does not burn. The text gives us this paradox and does not explain it, in the same way that it gives us the chalkydry, without explaining why the sun needs crocodile escorts. The fire is simply there, between the approacher and the throne, as a kind of pre-threshold. You would have to go through the fire to reach the throne, and the fire would not burn you. Not because fire doesn't burn, fire obviously burns, but because this particular fire, at this particular location, in this particular heaven, operates differently. Why? Because it is the seventh heaven's fire, and the seventh heaven operates by rules that the first six heavens do not share. The one Enoch tradition handles the same problem with the language of the house of fire, the crystal house and the fire house, one inside the other, the great glory at the center of the innermost room. The imagery is different, but the logic is the same. The approach to the summit requires passing through something that, at any lower level, would be an obstacle. At the seventh heaven, the obstacle yields. The fire parts. The approach continues. The 30 days. Vrevoil reads, Enoch writes, "You are in the 30 days in a sense. The 30 days of the return. The window of transmission. The finite time that the text is moving through before the permanent departure. Whatever you carry from tonight when you wake is the equivalent of the 366 books, the partial account, the incomplete reconstruction, the residue of having been somewhere you can't quite describe. What Michael does when he removes Enoch's earthly clothing deserves a moment of careful attention that I want to give it here. The earthly clothing is not described in detail before its removal. It is just the clothing Enoch arrived in, the garment appropriate to a mortal human being in the world below. But the act of removing it reveals, by implication, what it contained: a mortal human being's specific identity, accumulated across 365 years of specific existence. The clothing of a person is, in a very real sense, the person's most immediate boundary. It is what separates the self from the space around the self. It is what carries the smell of the life that has been lived, the texture of the specific world the person came from. Michael removes it carefully. The text says so, not ceremonially, carefully. And what Enoch is dressed in instead, the garment of glory, is described by what happens to him when he wears it. The fragrance becomes the oil's fragrance. The light becomes the oil's light. The quality of being that was, a moment ago, clearly that of a mortal human being in the seventh heaven, a being that did not belong here by nature, becomes something that the text can only describe by comparison, like one of the glorious ones. The comparison is everything. The text could have said he became glorious. It could have said he was transformed into an angel. It says, like one of the glorious ones. An analogy, not a definition. An observable likeness, not a claim of identity. He looked like one of them. He moved like one of them. The light that came off him was the same light that came off them. The difference between him and the beings of the seventh heaven, which had been visible throughout the ascent, as the fundamental difference between the traveller and the country, that difference was no longer observable. No longer observable. Not gone. The text is precise here too. It does not say the difference was abolished, or that he became something he was not. It says the difference was no longer observable. The observation is the test. By the test of observation he had passed. 30 days, Vrevoil reads. Enoch writes. The secrets of creation, the mechanics of the world, the principles that underlie the orderly machinery of the heavens we have travelled through tonight, are dictated to him in the language appropriate to the seventh heaven, and he transcribes them in whatever language a human being uses at the end of their ascent. The archangel reads, the former mortal writes, 366 books for 365 years, and the year that contains them. And now, what the longer version adds above the seventh heaven. I told you, hours ago, that it doesn't stop at 7. Here is where it goes. The eighth heaven is called Museloth, a Hebrew word connected to the zodiac, to the band of constellations that serves as the sky's calendar. The eighth heaven is the heaven of the calendar, of the year's structure, of the pattern that the fourth heaven's gates were expressing in their monthly shifts. The ninth heaven is called Kuchavim, the stars more broadly, the stellar field as a whole rather than the specific paths of the zodiac, and the 10th, Aravoth. The name comes from the Hebrew tradition's highest heaven, the place where the throne ultimately resides, in texts that push the cosmological map as high as it goes. In Aravoth, the longer version of 2 Enoch tells us, Enoch was shown something that the text then does not describe. Something. He was shown something in the 10th heaven that is beyond the 7th heaven's anointing, beyond the no observable difference, beyond everything the ascent had been building toward. And the text says only that he was shown it, not what it was, not how he responded, that he was shown. Which means 2 Enoch ends, in its longer form, at the same place that Paul ended his account of the third heaven, having been shown something and declining to describe what it was. The exhaustive describer and the deliberate withholder converging at the top. Paul's choice, to have been in the third heaven and to say nothing about what he heard, puts him in direct contrast with the entire project of 2 Enoch. Both are honest choices. The contrast between them is the last thing I want you to carry from tonight. This passage is not accepted as literal cosmology by any mainstream historian or cosmologist. What the scholars do accept is that the tradition of ascent through heavenly levels was real and widespread, and that the texts preserved it because people found it worth preserving. What remains true regardless of any of that is the sentence. Not as cosmological fact, as literary fact. Someone wrote it, and having written it, let it stand without commentary. Not as a cosmological fact, as a literary fact. Someone wrote the sentence, no observable difference, and having written it, let it stand without commentary. The restraint of that sentence, in a text that has been specific about everything, is itself a kind of answer to the question the whole ascent was asking. Not what is up there, what you could become if you went all the way up. It is time to come back down, the way he did. For 30 days, the text says, Enoch was allowed to go back. Not permanently, not as if the seventh heaven hadn't happened. 30 days, 1 month, 1 lunar month, the amount of time the divine court judged sufficient for a man to return to his life and do what he needed to do before leaving it for good. What he did in those 30 days is the quietest part of the story. He went home, he found his sons, he sat with them and taught them, passing on the books, the 366 volumes that Vrevoil had dictated and he had written, the record of everything he had seen and heard in the 7 heavens. He told them about the storehouses of snow, and the honey rivers, and the silent Grigori, and the throne and the oil. He told them what the 6 bands of angels in the 6th heaven were recording. He told them what paradise looked like, and what was north of it, and his sons. The text handles them with the dignity of people who cannot fully process what they're being told, but who understand that they are being given something, and that they should receive it carefully. They are not skeptical, they are not overwhelmed. They sit with their father, and they receive the books, and they try to understand. There is something about this scene. The father returned from the 7th heaven, sitting with his sons and handing over the books of everything, that registers differently in the middle of the night than it would in the daytime. The ordinariness of it, the domesticity. He came back from no observable difference between himself and the glorious ones, and what he did with the time he had was sit with his children and try to pass something on. The text does not treat this as anticlimactic. Neither should we. At the end of the 30 days, the visitors came again, the same 2 who had appeared at his couch at the beginning of the story. The same faces, the same wings, the same instruction. Come. And this time there was no 30-day return clause. This time the departure was permanent. The text says he was taken, the second taking, and that he went. And that is where the Book of Enoch's account of Enoch's life ends. There is a later tradition, much later, developed in the mystical literature of the early medieval Jewish world, that Enoch did not simply go up and stay in the 7th heaven in the form in which he arrived. The tradition says he was transformed into a different being entirely, the being called Metatron, the closest angel to the divine throne, the one sometimes called the Lesser Yorf, the one who sits when all other angels stand. I mention this tradition because it is real, and because it connects 2 Enoch to a larger universe of Jewish mystical thought. But it is not in 2 Enoch. It is a later development, built on the foundation that 2 Enoch and texts like it laid. I want to be clear about that boundary. What 2 Enoch says is, he was taken. The transformation into Metatron happens in other texts, later texts, which inherit the tradition and extend it. Tonight, we are in 2 Enoch. Now I need to pay something I planted in the credibility segment. In the opening of tonight's climb, I said that somewhere in the letters of the New Testament, a man described something that sounded like part of this journey. I said he was caught up to the 3rd heaven. I said he heard things that cannot be told. I said we would meet him near the end of the night. Your breath is slower now than it was an hour ago. Whatever you came to tonight carrying, the open question, the unfinished thought, the thing that was sitting on your chest when you first lay down, it has loosened, not resolved, loosened. There is a difference, and you can feel it right now if you pay attention. Here we are. The passage is in the second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 12, verses 2 through 4. The writer does not name himself in this passage. He writes in the third person, though the scholarly consensus is that he is describing his own experience. He says, "I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven. Whether in the body or out of the body I do not know. God knows. And I know that this man was caught up into paradise. Whether in the body or out of the body I do not know. God knows. And he heard things that cannot be told, which man may not utter." The writer, if the identification holds, is Paul, the Apostle Paul, one of the most consequential writers in the first century of the Common Era, describing what he presents as his own experience of something that looks, in outline, like the beginning of an ascent. He was caught up to the third heaven. He was caught up into paradise, and he heard things that cannot be told. He stopped there, not because he couldn't remember, not because the experience was vague or uncertain. He is specific about the level, the third heaven. He is specific about what was in the third heaven. Paradise, the same paradise that 2 Enoch places in the third heaven. He is specific that he heard things there. And then he declines to describe what he heard, on the grounds that a human being may not utter them. Set this beside 2 Enoch, which describes everything. 2 responses to the same claim. I went up, I was in the third heaven, I was in paradise. Something happened to me there. 1 response. Here is what everything was, level by level, right up to the throne. Here are the chalky-dree. Here is the honey river. Here is the oil whose fragrance is like myrrh, and whose light is greater than the greatest light. Here is what happened to me. No observable difference. The other response. I was there. I heard things. I am not going to tell you. The 2 responses are not in contradiction exactly. They are not even necessarily describing the same experience, but the contrast between them is real and worth sitting with. The tradition of ascent generated both of these, the exhaustive describer and the deliberate withholder. The tradition held both. Both of them have their admirers. Both are, in some sense, honest responses to the same kind of experience. And now the honest reckoning, because tonight deserves one. Here is what we know, as a matter of historical and textual fact. 2 Enoch exists. It is a real document, surviving in Old Church Slavonic, transmitted in miscellanies through the medieval Slavic world, first edited in 1880, first translated into English in 1896, still the subject of scholarly debate about which of its 2 recensions better reflects what the original said. Its content is genuinely in the text. The 7 heavens, the storehouses of weather, the apostate angels in the second heaven, the paradise and place of punishment in the third, the sun chariot and its escort of chalky-dree, the Grigori in the 5th, the recording angels in the 6th, the anointing in the 7th, the 366 books and the 30-day return, all of it described with the specificity I have tried to honor tonight. Whatever your accounting looks like, whatever the 6th heavens recorders have in your file, whatever the balance is between what you'd want preserved and what you'd rather wasn't, you are not required to audit it tonight. The accounting continues whether you think about it or not. For now, you can let it continue without your participation. Here is what we do not know, as a matter of historical and textual fact. Who wrote it? Exactly when? And in what precise form? Whether the longer or shorter recension is more original. Whether any of what it describes corresponds to anything outside the text, to any actual structure of the sky, to any actual experience of ascent, to any actual cosmological reality. Whether the sentence "no observable difference" is a theological claim, a visionary report, a literary invention, a wish, or something that resists all of those categories. What the scholars agree on, and this is the thing that outlasts all the uncertainty, the thing that no amount of textual critical argument can reduce, is that someone needed to write it. Someone needed to make the ascent complete, level by level, to name every level, to give every level its specific contents and its specific inhabitants and its specific function. Someone needed the map to be whole. The need that produced two Enoch is not in doubt. The need is the most durable fact the text contains. Let me say something about the 30 days that deserves more than a paragraph. A man who had been to the seventh heaven came back to a house, who had been anointed with oil whose light was greater than the greatest light, who had spent 30 days with Vravoil being read the secrets of creation, who had been told, implicitly, that there was no observable difference between himself and the beings of the eternal fire. This man went home, to his sons, to whatever the domestic arrangements of his life had been before the two visitors appeared at his couch. The text does not say what this re-entry was like. It does not describe his face when he walked through the door, or whether his sons recognized him immediately, or whether there was a moment of disorientation, on their part or his, before the recognition settled. What it describes is what he did. He sat with them, and he taught them, and he handed over the books. This is the most unremarked upon part of the entire ascent tradition, the teacher returning from the summit and sitting down with the students, not performing the return, not dramatizing the re-entry, not giving a speech about what the seventh heaven contained, simply sitting and beginning to talk and trusting that what he had been told was worth transmitting even to people who would never go where he had been. The sons receive it. They don't fully understand it. How could they? But they receive it with the care appropriate to something being given by someone who is not going to give it twice. They know he is going back. The text implies they know the 30 days are 30 days. They are receiving an inheritance in real time, while the person bequeathing it is still present and alive and sitting across from them. Think about what it would mean to know that the person teaching you will not be here in 30 days. Not because of illness or accident, because they have been scheduled to leave, because the return was always temporary, because the 30 days was the visit, and the visit is coming to an end, and everything being said now is being said in the knowledge that this is the last window. The sons of Enoch, in the 30 days of his return, were living inside the most concentrated transmission of any teaching tradition, a finite window, a complete inheritance, and a teacher who had been where no one else had been, and who was doing everything in his power to pass it on before the window closed. That is what teaching looks like at its most serious. Not the leisurely accumulation of a long relationship, but the urgent, loving, careful transmission of everything that matters, in the time that is available, by someone who knows the time is finite. You have been patient tonight. 2.5 hours of patient attention to a book that survived by hiding in the margins of other books, in a language most of the world couldn't read, waiting to be found by a Russian scholar in 1880 and brought to the English-speaking world in 1896. You are very near the end of the chain. The book waited a very long time for this particular hour. Now the Paul passage, which I want to give more space than the outline asked for, because it deserves it. Paul was writing the second letter to the Corinthians to a community he had founded and then left, and then been criticized by, and then defended himself to. The context of 2 Corinthians 12 is a defense of his apostolic authority. He is responding to people who had challenged his credentials, his experience, his right to claim what he claimed. And in the middle of this defense, he produces what is arguably the strangest passage in his entire corpus. A description, in the third person, of his own ascent to the third heaven. The third-person construction is the first strange thing. He says, "I know a man in Christ who was caught up," not "I was caught up." Scholars have debated why he does this. The most common explanation is that the third person is a way of creating distance from an experience that he finds difficult to claim ownership of. that the experience was so categorically different from ordinary experience that he cannot quite own it in the first person. The experience happened to him, but the him that it happened to was not quite the him that is writing about it. Hence, a man in Christ. He was caught up to the third heaven, which, in Toot Enoch's map, is the heaven of paradise. The garden, the honey river, the tree of life. The keeper maintaining the readiness of the place for those who are assigned to it. Paul was caught up to paradise. He heard things there. He specifies this. He heard things that cannot be told, which man may not utter. The prohibition on uttering is the second strange thing. It is not that he forgot what he heard. It is that he is not permitted to say it. The word he uses in Greek implies a rule, a constraint, not a personal disinclination. He was at a level of the sky where information is present that cannot be transferred downward into human language without violating something. He was in paradise, in the third heaven, and he heard something there that belongs to that level and cannot be moved. Contrast this with 2 Enoch, which moves everything downward. The entire project of the book is the transfer of information from the upper levels of the sky to the suns waiting below. 366 books, everything Vervoil read, everything Enoch saw and heard, brought back and written down and handed over. The two traditions approach the same territory with exactly opposite methods. 2 Enoch says everything, Paul says nothing. Both choices are defensible. Both require something of the person who makes them. Saying everything requires the willingness to be wrong, to be incomplete, to produce a text that will be argued about for 2,000 years. Saying nothing requires the willingness to be mysterious, to leave people with the knowledge that you were there, and that something happened, and that you are not going to tell them what. Paul's silence is, in its own way, as specific as Toot Enoch's exhaustive description. Both are honest about having been in the third heaven. They simply reach different conclusions about what to do with that. And both of them arrived at those conclusions in rooms not so different from the one you are in now, at hours not so different from this one, working with the language available to them and the silence available to them, and making their best attempt at whatever the thing is that happened at the top of the climb. What remains true? The books exist. The letter exists. The tradition exists. People kept copying it. You are listening to it. The chain holds. And what remains true either way, regardless of recension priority, regardless of original language, regardless of what the anointing oil corresponds to, is that the book existed. That for 2,000 years, in whatever language would carry it, people kept copying it. That the journey we have taken tonight is the journey people believed was worth keeping. Books about the way up survive. That may be the most human fact in this whole story. Now, the mirror. Every night, you do a small version of this. You don't think of it that way. It doesn't feel like an ascent. It feels like falling, which is, as it happens, almost exactly what it is. But in the moment between consciousness and sleep, in the few seconds before whatever carries you under takes hold completely, something happens to the quality of your awareness that is not unlike what the text describes in the first stages of the ascent. The ordinary world recedes. The familiar objects in the room lose some of their grip. The concerns of the day that felt so fixed and important an hour ago begin to become what they actually are: contingent, subject to change, not nearly as heavy as they were at noon. And then, if you go all the way down, you are somewhere else. The mind that goes to sleep is not quite the mind that wakes up. Something happens in between that no waking account can fully capture. The same problem the ascent literature ran into at the top. Something is experienced that resists the language of the person who experienced it, because the language of the person who experienced it is daytime language, and what happened was nighttime. The Book of the Seven Heavens is, among other things, a very old description of what we all half remember at the edge of sleep: the loosening, the lightening, the sense that there might be more above you, or inside you, or somewhere adjacent to the ordinary world of rooms and responsibilities than the ordinary world of rooms and responsibilities suggests. The ancients formalized this into a map, 7 levels, each with a specific character, a specific population, a specific light quality and atmosphere. We no longer need the formalization, or rather, we have forgotten it. But the sensation that the formalization was trying to describe is the same sensation that carried you here tonight, to this kind of content, at this kind of hour. The 7 heavens are very old. The experience that generated them is not. If you are still with me, and if you're reading this, congratulations, you are awake, which was never the goal but is entirely fine. Let me say something before the close. Tonight we travelled through a book that survived by hiding. A book that was copied into the margins of other texts, passed from monastery to monastery in a language most of the world couldn't read, rediscovered by a Russian scholar in 1880, translated into English 16 years later, argued over for another century, and is still being argued over now. It survived not because it was protected or elevated or declared canonical by any authority. It survived because individual scribes, in individual rooms, at individual hours that were probably not so different from this one, decided it was worth copying one more time. They copied a book about ascent in order to descend into sleep. Or maybe they didn't think about it that way. Maybe they just copied what they were given because the act of copying was itself a form of keeping, and keeping was what they knew how to do. Either way, they kept it. And it arrived here. Before you go all the way under, a very soft ask. If tonight was useful, if the storehouses of snow settled something, if the 5th heavens return to singing did something, a quiet tap on like, or a comment with where you are and what hour it is exactly what I need. Nothing more than that. Subscribe if this is the kind of night you come here for. There is a membership link if you want to come along for more of these climbs, the ones that go further into texts like this one. But all of it is optional. Resting here, at this altitude, is already everything. And now the close. Pay W1. Go back to the beginning. Not the beginning of tonight, the beginning of the story, the beginning of the book. There is a man lying on a couch in the dark. He is 365 years old, though the number is not meant the way we would mean it. It is the number of days in the solar year, the Enochic year, the year that the book was designed around. He is asleep, or nearly. The house is quiet. The room is whatever rooms were at night in the ancient world. Darker than this, quieter than this, the dark of a room where the nearest lamp is somewhere else. And then, 2 faces. I told you we would come back to them. Here we are. The 2 visitors who appeared at the head of his bed. Enormous, face like the sun, eyes like burning lamps, wings brighter than gold, hands whiter than snow, were the beginning of everything. Without them, no 1st heaven, no storehouses of weather, no 2nd heaven's prisoners, no paradise, no sun chariot and its crocodile escort, no silent Grigori waiting to be asked to sing, no 7th heaven and its oil. All of that started here. A man in bed, asleep, and 2 faces appearing in the room. You are in a room right now. You are lying down. The room is dark, or close to dark. The things in the room around you are very still. Whatever sounds exist outside the window or down the hall, whatever the particular acoustic texture of your specific night is, you have been half listening to them for the last hour and a half without quite registering them, and they have become, in that time, part of what the room feels like, a known sound, a known dark. Enoch's journey began exactly here, in this condition, in this posture, in this quality of attention, a person lying in the dark, letting go of the day, not quite asleep and not quite awake, in the particular borderland where the ceiling of the ordinary world starts to seem permeable. What appeared at his bed, if it appeared, is not guaranteed to appear at yours. The book does not promise that the 7 heavens are available to every person who lies down in the dark and is willing. It tells the story of one person, chosen for reasons the text does not fully explain, given a journey no other mortal had been given in the same form, and allowed to return with the books. It is not a manual, it is a testimony. But the posture is the same. The dark is the same. The quality of the hour, the particular loosening that happens at the edge of sleep, that is the same for you as it was for him. You are lying in the same direction. The ceiling above you is, in its own way, the first heaven's floor. Let the storehouses tend themselves tonight. The snow is inventoried, the dew is accounted for. Whatever falls on the fields and the roads and the rooftops between now and morning has been measured and allocated by someone who has been doing that job for longer than the word snow has been a word. The 5th heaven is singing again. The Grigori, who were silent for as long as their brothers were fallen, are back in their liturgy, because someone asked them to be, because it only takes asking. The song you don't hear is real. And whatever is at the top of the 7th heaven, at the top of 8 or 9 or 10 heavens, in the versions that keep climbing, whatever the great glory is, whatever the throne holds, whatever the oil corresponded to in the experience of the person who wrote the sentence, no observable difference, it has waited this long. It can wait until morning. The storehouses can wait until morning. The paradise in the 3rd heaven can wait until morning. The honey river still flowing the way it always flows. The tree of life standing at the center in the light that is not the light of any sun. The recording angels in the 6th heaven can wait until morning. They have your whole account already, and one night of sleep does not affect the record. Let me describe the experience I am trying to give a name to when I say the nightly ascent, because the analogy deserves more precision than a general gesture. When you fall asleep, you do not simply stop thinking. The process of falling asleep is a sequence of distinct stages, each one different from the one before, each one with its own quality of awareness, its own relationship to the body and the room, and the accumulated concerns of the day. The hypnagogic state, the name for the interval between wakefulness and sleep, is one of the most unusual states of consciousness that human beings regularly enter. Yet because we enter it every night, we rarely think of it as the remarkable thing it is. It is ordinary, in the way that the 1st heaven's storehouses are ordinary, simply the ground floor of a larger structure. In the hypnagogic state, the boundaries of the self begin to thin. The distinction between the contents of the mind and the space of the room becomes less sharp. Objects in the room may seem closer or further than they are. The sound of traffic outside may become the sound of something else. A voice, your own or someone else's, may appear for a moment in the space between wakefulness and sleep, saying something that the waking mind would not have said. An image may appear with the vividness of perception rather than the vagueness of imagination, specific, detailed, organized in the way that perception organizes things, not in the way that imagination organizes things. And then, further in, the dream proper. Where are you in a dream? Not in the room where your body is lying. Not in the world that existed before you closed your eyes. In the logic of the dream, a world with its own architecture, its own physics, its own inhabitants, its own quality of light, which can be utterly convincing while it is happening, and utterly resistant to reconstruction when it ends. The ascent literature of the ancient world, the maps of the 7 heavens, the accounts of what was seen on the way up, is, among other things, an attempt to do what you cannot do when you wake from a dream, to reconstruct the architecture of the other place, to give it a name and a structure and a population, to say, this is what is above the place where you normally stop, this is what is at the next level, and the one after that, and the one after that. The dream dissolves, the visionary's account survives, in whatever form the visionary chose to give it. 2 Enoch chose the form of the inventory, complete, level by level, specific about the contents of each level, honest about the difficulty of the highest level, and honest about what was resolved, and honest about what was not. The book is the dream's residue, written down in the 30 days before Enoch was taken back, the attempt to transfer the architecture of the upper place into the language of the lower one before the window closed. You do a small version of this every night. You go somewhere above the ordinary. You are present there, fully, in whatever kind of full presence the dream permits. And then you return, not with 366 books, not with the account of 7 heavens, but with whatever the night left behind. A mood, a half-remembered image, the sense of having been somewhere, without quite being able to say where. The sense of having been somewhere is real. The tradition that produced 2 Enoch recognized it as real. It built a map around it. Tonight you have that map. You have the storehouses of the first heaven's snow. You have the grieving prisoners of the second. You have the paradise and its northern counterpart in the third. You have the chalkydry singing to the sun in the fourth. You have the fifth heaven's silence broken by a human voice. You have the recording angels of the sixth. You have the fire and the throne and the oil and the no observable difference of the seventh. You have the map. The climb is over. The descent, as always, is gentler and faster than the ascent. Enoch's 30 days are done. His sons have the books. The visit has ended and the permanent departure has begun. The bed at the beginning of the story, the couch where 2 enormous faces appeared, is where the book also ends. Not described but implied by everything that followed. The journey began in a bedroom. The journey led to the summit of the sky. The summit changed the traveler in the way that the text described, with perfect precision, no observable difference. And then he went back, briefly, to the place it all began. Now you go back to where you were before I began speaking. The room, the dark, your body in the position it has settled into over the last 2 hours. The world above this room is tended. This night is tended. Whatever the next level above the ceiling of the ordinary is, whatever the first heaven's equivalent of the room you are lying in, it is staffed and inventoried, and the inventory is accurate. The sky can wait until morning. The world can wait until morning. For now, you can rest.